Today I'm going to be talking about Carrhae, a place in Turkey, a small little town in Turkey, where one of Rome's greatest defeats happened. Now this battle interests me because it actually involved one of the guys in the triumvirate with Julius Caesar. Now Julius Caesar is obviously the more famous of all the triumvirate, considering he was the forerunner to the emperors. But the other member of the triumvirate that I'm going to be talking about in this particular battle is Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was considered the richest man in Rome, and it was actually his patronage that allowed Caesar to go on his gallivanting in Gaul, let's just say. Now, a bit of background story before the battle. It occurred to Crassus that his two triumvirate friends were quite well known and quite respected in the Roman Republic due to their military endeavors. Julius Caesar obviously conquering Gaul, and Pompey Magnus having won most of his glory in Spain at the head of his father's legions, or the legions that he inherited from his father. Now Crassus wanted to have his own prestige, and being the richest man in Rome, he felt he had the means to do so. So he decided to invade the Parthian Empire to try and take even more wealth from them to augment his own. So he did this without the help of the Roman Senate, or they did not ratify it, and he marched off to the east to try and conquer Parthia. Now the best way to get into the Parthian Empire was to go through Armenia. Now the king at the time of Armenia did not allow Crassus to go through, and this proved to be a very crucial aspect in the campaign. So Crassus decided to march his army over the deserts of Mesopotamia to try and invade the Parthian Empire from there. This gave the Parthian Empire, a chance to counter Crassus's invasion, and they did so under the generalship of Surena, who led an outnumbered force, I must say. The Romans did outnumber the Parthians in the beginning, but he had a very large force of cavalry, cataphracts, horse archers, and obviously he was fighting on home ground, and they did know the desert quite a bit better than the Romans. So Crassus started to march his army through, and against the advice of his second in command or other commanders under him, he decided to march his column in a square formation with 12 cohorts of infantry on the outside and the cavalry and baggage on the inside of this hollow square. Generally, Roman troops would march with the cavalry on the wings and the infantry in the center, and this allowed them to move a bit more swiftly. Now the square formation slowed down the advance quite significantly and made their march across the desert longer than it might have been. But alternatively, to march not in a square formation might have led Surena to release his cavalry onto the exposed Roman lines. However, Surena did have a bit of respect for had quite a bit of respect for his adversaries, as he did try a few ruses to try and scare the Roman lines and impact their morale negatively, which didn't really work. And after a number of these ruses, it was pretty obvious that the best tactic to use with a slow-moving column was to deploy the horse archers, which the Parthians did. And it is from this battle basically that the Parthian shot becomes a well-known phrase, because every time the Romans tried to engage the horse archers, they would either be run off by the arrows of the horse archers themselves, or the horse archers would just melt away and flee on their horses. And over time, this wore away at the Roman lines, and eventually they started to crack. The only hope that Crassus had left was that the enemy would eventually run out of arrows, which was a common occurrence for battlefields where you could use up pretty much all your ammunition very quickly. But Surena had made plans for this and had actually imported or brought with him thousands of camels carrying extra bundles of arrows just so that they could keep up the onslaught. And this continued and continued, and the Roman line was worn away slowly and inexorably. Was worn away constantly. The final gamble came when Crassus sent his own son to attempt to attack the Parthians and bring them into hand-to-hand combat. So he sent off his son with their remaining cavalry and charged the line. The horse archers melted away and led this ill-fated cavalry charge further and further away from the safety of the Roman square, until they were eventually cut off enough, and then they were run down by Surena's cataphracts. Eventually Surena tossed Crassus's son's head back into the square to show that his son was now dead. The attack of the Parthians continued and continued, till eventually nightfall fell, and Crassus ordered the retreat to the nearby town of Carrhae. There he was offered a truce by Surena, and they met to parley. As they met, one of Surena's men grabbed Crassus's reins and sparked an incident. All the generals were killed, all the soldiers were captured, and very few returned. In the end, the cost of the battle was 20,000 Roman lives killed, 10,000 captured, and more worryingly for Rome was the taking of several legionary eagles, which were considered sacred and were a symbol of Roman might. The Parthian general should also be given his due. He did very well in anticipating the Romans' tactics, in realizing their strengths, and more importantly having the foresight to bring in extra ammunitions for his horse archers, the most, or what I believe to be the most effective part of his army. This victory also gave them the myth that Parthians could defeat Romans whenever they chose. And this myth persisted throughout the Roman Empire period, even though the Romans did sack the Parthian capital and defeated their army a number of times. But as with most things in history, the tide would swing back and forth between the two. Back in Rome, this also caused quite an upheaval in the political sphere, as now the triumvirate was no longer made of 3 men, but just 2. And with the death of Pompey's wife, which connected the Caesar and Pompey lines in marriage, their animosity slowly started to grow towards each other until there was eventual war, the loss of the Republic, and the first emperors under Augustus. Well, thanks for listening to me ramble. If you have anything to say about what I said, just leave a comment, or if you thought it was pretty good or pretty bad, leave a like or a dislike, as it were. And if you want to see more videos, just subscribe. We also have a Twitter @Tortoise Watered.